All right. First rule of this channel, we not talk about this channel. Second rule of this channel, this is not legal advice. So I guess I have some stuff to talk about. I don't like just putting out content for the sake of putting out content. I don't like wasting people's times. In this case, real life stuff. And then I think there's enough camp news right now to kind of break down some of the stuff that's going on, how it's going to affect my strategies. When it comes to camp stuff, it's always about like what I thought I knew and what I'm hearing, and I'm trying to kind of comparing those two things together. I want to know what I'm drafting when I'm drafting. I want to know, is this like a week one lottery ticket that I just want to, check something out and throw away? Or this is a guy that I'm expecting to be some type of bedrock of my lineup, that type of Bobby Trees. So these are the things that I'm looking at. And remember, everything that's going on is not within a vacuum. There's going to be some type of equal and opposite reaction, not just to, the teams that are out there, but to my draft strategy when it comes to some of the things that are going out there. I did do a mock draft in my high school league just to kind of see how my strategy was going to work out there. I didn't particularly like how it worked out because I would end up having to put like my eggs in the basket of Chris Godwin and Scary Terry, working their way out as my like wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. And I may get lucky and one of those guys may be a league winner, and I may get lucky and the other guy can end up being like a solid wide receiver 2, but that's a lot asking. And those were the guys that I got like in the 6th or 7th round of my draft. So I do like your McLaurin. I do like Chris Godwin in general, expecting that I'm going to win a league as those being my wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. And that's with getting other guys like Jalen Polk or Lad McConkey in that league. Like, it's a lot to ask that I can hit on all those guys and still be able to win. I was very running back heavy. I did go elite quarterback and elite tight end. So I did like those things in general, but I felt like I can replace some of the running back production later in the draft, and then that would allow me to go get a wide receiver later. So that really kind of changed my mind on potentially even going like Drake London in a second. Potentially even, getting a Nico Collins even in the 3rd round of that high school league. If he falls to me there, even though I do like Devin A-Chain, it just becomes an issue of like, who is going to be the guy that I expect to be, the rock of my wide receiver core. And, Scary Terry and Chris Godwin may end up putting up the same type of production of Nico Collins. But again, like, drafting good offenses versus bad offenses. Bad offenses do not necessarily equal stay away from a fantasy perspective. It's all about price. And that's what we're talking about today is, how much I can mitigate my risk by going after other guys later in the draft versus the guys that I'm spending on. Like, I'm expecting them to hit, and they need to hit because there's only so many of those guys I can miss on those top 5 picks and still think I got like a really good puncher's chance to win my league. Otherwise, like, I brought this up last time. I don't know how many people out there said like they lost their league because they busted on a 7th round draft pick. Like, we can talk about how many leagues have been lost because someone missed on that 3rd round draft pick. And that's one of the things, like, talking about like when to punt and how to punt and, when to follow those rules and all that stuff. Like, it's really going to depend on a lot of things. One of the things that changed my mind in the mock was I missed out on Rachaad White in the 4th. And I think there's a good chance in that high school league, based off of just how those guys draft, that they're going to go up and they're going to overvalue elite quarterback and they're going to overvalue elite tight end. And that means that there's a better chance that I'm going to get a 3rd strong running back in the 4th than having to go so early in the draft and go spend my capital on like a Travis Etienne and go like, I may end up with the same type of production from Etienne in the 2nd as a Rachaad White in the 4th. Is that risky? Those are the things that I would look at and go like, well, who are the other guys that I'd be looking at? And then I started looking at like, well, I could get like a Devontae Adams. And just because Devontae Adams goes over the age apex doesn't mean that he's off my board. It just becomes like, well, how ugly is he to me if I can get him in the 2nd round of my draft? And that's what I would generally be looking at when I go after some of these guys. Like the 2nd round of that high school league, Devontae Adams doesn't have to quote unquote be a league winner. He just has to be that guy who's going to get me like 15, 17 points a game. And that's equal to Travis Etienne, what I expect to have is Travis Etienne. Now, the chances that I think that I'm going to get that legendary range of outcomes from a Travis Etienne, he probably has the higher ceiling. He's got the better chance to win me a league. He also has the opportunity to basically put up the same amount of production as a Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams is going to be like the runaway target hog attached to that offense. It may not be the best offense. There's still some risk involved with it, but how am I going to replace that production that I passed on to go after a luxury pick? Because I would expect in this high school league, because of that 105, to go up and get that Bijan. That's who I got in this league. I'm fairly certain that I'm going to be able to get him. And the only thing that would change my mind if I have to go a different direction. Now, the other thing to talk about, and this is why I have these guys pulled up, Justin Jefferson with a hamstring. You got DeAndre Hopkins with a knee. Doesn't look like he's going to get surgery. He could be back week 1. And then you have Justin Herbert with his foot injury. Generally speaking, if guys are injured, just get rid of them. And that means, in the case of Justin Herbert, that means like all Chargers. That means even my boy Lad McConkey, probably going to stay away from it. I would expect like the equal and opposite reaction from a ranking standpoint, that Lad McConkey should be falling down ADP. Like, if you can't trust the Chargers offense because Justin Herbert, you're buying Justin Herbert as much as anything else. And if he's injured, then everybody else should become less appealing, because the offense is going to be, at the very least, less predictable. And the same thing when I talk about like the Titans. It's becoming more and more clear to me when it comes to the Titans with the running back situation. We can talk about like, is not Calvin Austin, Calvin Ridley, good at football? Is he going to be over the AJ Pex at 30 this year? DeAndre Hopkins, probably an offense that I'm leaning towards being more reactive on than proactive, finding out what happens week 1. Going after that, like either with trades or off the waiver wire. That's probably a little bit better way to handle it than like actually go, hey, I need to spend on these guys, versus some of these other bad offenses that we're projecting, because I'm starting to get a little bit more bullish on the Patriots. And I'm also starting to get a little bit more bullish on one of the other teams that are out there, the Giants, because I'm expecting that they're going to maybe not be quite as big of train wrecks. And then if I can just price shop them, what am I getting out of these guys? So like, even like a Malik Neighbors, and we'll get to him a little bit in a second, like, starting to change my mind and go like, well, what am I actually drafting? What am I actually drafting when I get him? Like, know what I'm drafting. Am I drafting a lottery ticket too early in the draft? Or am I drafting, a guy that I'm just like, well, I'm going to get a certain amount of weeks out of this guy. Like, those are things I'd be looking at. So like Justin Jefferson would be a guy that I'd be going like, okay, I got the 105 in the snake draft league. Justin Jefferson would be a guy that I'd be considering with that pick, over, going up on a Garrett Wilson in that pick. Like, if Bijan's not there, now this injury takes a lot of these guys off the board when I look at them and I go like, well, Jamar Chase, we're going to talk about Jamar Chase today. Justin Jefferson's got that injury. There's a lot of mouths to feed when it comes to the sun god. Like, if I don't get Bijan, like, who am I going to go after? Because like, now with this injury to Justin Jefferson, we can predict certain things ahead of time. It's not with 100% clarity, but like when you look at like Cooper Kupp last year or Joe Burrow, like, there were stuff telling us like, hey, maybe they should be someone else's problem. And those are all the little things I look at and go like, well, how do I build this lineup? If I hit on a Puka or I hit on a Kyron Williams, because I can do that most years, finding those guys off the waiver wire. I'm not going to be perfect. I'm not going to hit on like your Sam Laportas on every year, but I can find enough of those guys late. Now I can start building the roster, except for the fact that if I don't hit the right guys, they don't have to maximize their upside. They don't have to hit their ceilings. They have to give me something in my lineup, because I can't go out and magically find everybody to win a league. And that's what I basically had to do in my main money league, because, the Aaron Rodgers injury hurt. And I was, behind the 8 ball when it came to that, like for most of the season. We also made a trade to go get Jalen Hurts, and we traded away like our number 1 running back, and we were kind of behind on that also the rest of the season. It was a good trade at the end of the day. So like these little things that go on, like, well, how do I want to build this? Do I want to put so much risk that I can be so perfect finding all the right guys? And maybe a little bit more punting may be involved with some of my strategy at some of these points going on. But anyway, what we're here to talk about, like some of the changes that are going on out there. ESPN League, Marvin Harrison, Drake London, Rachaad White, they all move up. So again, like, they're going closer to where they should be going. Getting a little bit off on Marvin Harrison. Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, they get moved down. I like Jalen Hurts a little bit more than I like Josh Allen. Deontay Johnson moves way up. Christian Kirk goes way up. Terry McLaurin way up. Kyle Pitts way up. Jonathan Brooks tumbles a little bit. That's to be expected. Jaylen Warren, we're going to talk a lot about Jaylen Warren. Kyler Murray falls all the way down. He's probably, in my opinion, Kyler Murray is probably the best all-around quarterback when it comes to like value versus like risk versus reward. Kyler Murray. So my high school league can't go get him, because he's going like where he should be going about, like, I think pick 50. That's why I wound up with like Anthony Richardson in this league, because he wasn't where I would like to go up and get him. And then the equal and opposite reaction to that in this league, or in my auction league with Kyler Murray, is he is the guy that I would be shooting for in my auction league. And then you have your Jordan Loves, your Brock Purdy's get moved down because, again, they're going to be capped. Rome goes up. Ladd McConkey go up. More interested in Rome right now than I am Ladd McConkey because of the injury. Jalen Daniels moves up again. So now he's going to get drafted as starting quarterbacks in a lot of leagues as a QB1. Now I'm getting off the Jalen Daniels train. Talk more about him. David Njoku and Jake Ferguson get moved down. I'm on them because they're going down. I like them a little bit more. So Zach Moss gets moved down. Chase Brown gets moved up. Brock Bowers is now in like that consideration for tight end 1 on here. Chuba Hubbard shoots way up because of the Jonathan Burks news, which is not something that should be surprising anybody. Caleb Williams moves down, but now I'm on board with him because the train with Jalen Daniels moves up. I'm not interested in Pop Douglas at all, but he gets moved up into draftability. Khalil Shakur gets moved way up. Jalen Polk gets moved way up. Romeo Dobbs and Dontavian Wicks get moved way up. They're on fringe draftability on this ESPN league. Rico Dowdle gets moved way up because, like if there's a guy that's going to win leagues out of the Cowboys backfield, it's him. Tyrone Tracy, we're going to talk a little bit about him. Still undraftable. He should be drafted now. And then Andre Iosivas, he's we're going to talk about him. He's still undraftable, but he's fringe draftability even in your shallower leagues. All right, already talked about like Devontae Adams. We'll move on. Already talked about the injuries when it comes to these guys. Jaylen Warren. So I listened to an unhealthy amount of fantasy football content, and the argument was made at least one place because I don't remember where I listened to it, or I give him credit. But in this case with Jaylen Warren, yeah, now Jaylen Warren is one of the guys that I would be targeting in all my leagues. So again, if we're going after receiving running backs, again, the two things we want are red zone opportunities, attached to good offenses, and then design receiving work. Well, Jaylen Warren basically meets one of the criteria of that, and that's the receiving work. So the expectation that he can at least get like 30 more yards, be a poor man's version of like an RB1, it's there. So if I would have told you last year that or if I tell you this year that you could get last year's Bijan, 976 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns to go along with like 487, 4 touchdowns, but you're going to get him around like pick 70 or 80 of your draft, like you'd be like, yeah, I'll take that. Well, that's what we're generally looking at with that Arthur Smith offense coming over to the Steelers. So maybe I don't get league winner, but I get good enough when it comes to replacement level running back, especially in those like 0 RB builds or those hero RB builds, and I still have enough upside. So again, like maybe I get a little more, bit more touchdowns out of Jaylen Warren. Well, I don't really care about that. What I care about is probably going to get about the same amount of receiving work or better because the offense does project to be better, whether it's Justin Fields or it's Russell Wilson. And then, the rest of this stuff just becomes gravy. Now, where it gets really interesting when I heard this, which really changed my mind, is knowing now what we know of being able to get like on board with Austin Eckler running back 6 in 2019. Like, where we didn't predict this ahead of time. Well, we have a running back that's being used in a particular role in the offense in that receiving category that we want. Like that's one of the things. Add those guys to the list. Those guys that are going to hit a particular level of receiving work automatically should be drafted. That's what we're just looking at with Jaylen Warren. So he didn't have it last year, but how much can we predict it further into this year? Well, that becomes the question. He's probably going to have relatively the same role in the offense from a production standpoint. And then it's like, well, how much more can I get out of it? Touchdowns can be very volatile. So like, it's probably unlikely that he's going to go down on 4 overall touchdowns when, you're looking at somewhere between like 250, 300 combined touches for Jaylen Warren. It's probably going to go up. That's just how, like probability functions. And then to get that together with like, a poor man's version of last year's Bijan, because he's probably not going to get less opportunity. If anything, he's going to get more opportunity, or more importantly, more efficient opportunity in that offense. And then I can go after him and go like, well, now I can get 2019 Austin Eckler, because that was the argument of like, do you want to be the guy that misses out on Austin Eckler because you're going after this receiving work, and that 370 that Jaylen Warren had is similar to that 400 that Austin Eckler had. And then in that case, Austin Eckler was on the same team as Melvin Gordon. You're looking at a very similar situation. We can predict this ahead of time. And he's in the range. Again, no one's ever complained about busting on a 7th round draft pick where it doesn't matter. At the very least, I'm buying like an ugly RB2 that's going to have enough week to week floor because of that receiving work that it doesn't matter. I'm going to have a guy that like, I'm buying a 40-degree day at a price that's sub 40-degree day. And then, I can figure out other things, as opposed to, and this is why I bring up this mock draft I had with Scary Terry and Chris Godwin, is I'm buying sub 40-degree days that I'm hoping I can get more out of. Well, when it comes to Jaylen Warren, from a running back perspective, I'm buying a guy to slot into my RB2 slot, and I can just forget about it because I know I'm going to get a certain amount of week-to-week receiving work that's going to allow me to never have to worry about the position again. This is the right type of punt to be having. And this idea of being able to get this guy where he's going at in drafts definitely changes my mind to bring him up on this ESPN league so we can visualize it. Even if I go up a little bit to go get a Jaylen Warren, like what am I actually missing out on? Like, and Jonathan Brooks, we're going to talk a little bit more about today at where he's going at. So like, I can maybe be a little bit more aggressive with a Jaylen Warren. I can also let him fall to me at this range as things work out down the line. And if I punt that running back position, because there's other guys I go at, like I know I have some of these guys to go after in that RB2 range to not just fill out my roster, to give me that rock, that Bobby Trees, to give me a little bit of upside, because that's what I want to be always shooting at with my draft picks. I don't want to just play it safe. I want safe with upside. All right. Moving on from Jaylen Warren to other guys. So Jaden Daniels, he goes up. He's on Fantasy Pros. He's up to like 87 overall to bring him up right here. Well, he was 87. He's now 86. So he keeps moving up on the ECR. Well, now that upside that Jaden Daniels has, I'm going to have to pay for. So now I'm even looking at having to pay like 76 overall to go get Jaden Daniels. This is actually what happened in that mock draft is I had to go up on him. And at that point I was like, like, what am I actually going to be getting out of him? Now, he's probably going to finish as a quarterback one. That's not necessarily the question. The question is, when I'm buying 110 Jaden Daniels and I have a dart throw chance at getting QB1 overall or sub-elite quarterback, that's one thing. When I'm spending a pick that may end up being a guy that I would use as a week-to-week replacement with upside, and I have to get a certain amount of return on that Jaden Daniels pick, it turns from being a lottery ticket to a guy that I have to get some type of return on. And there are other guys that have similar ranges of outcomes, like your Caleb Williams, because I'm buying probably a better offense with a better opportunity to score touchdowns because it's a better offense. So I'm buying the theoretical design rushing work when it comes to Caleb Williams. The red zone rushing work for Caleb Williams. That's what I'd be buying. But I can get that at 102. Now, again, if I want the Jaden Daniels, I got to go up to like 76 overall. With Caleb Williams, depending on what my build is and depending on a couple other things that are out there, like one of the things I was thinking about with Caleb Williams is, is he going to be a lottery ticket on my bench, or is he going to be a guy that I'm going to be starting week one? Well, at like 102 overall, if he falls to me, like he can be more of a lottery ticket for my build to see if I can get like, that sub-elite type of quarterback based off that. And the situation is generally better with Caleb Williams than it's going to be with Jaden Daniels, even though Jaden Daniels probably has a higher upside. So I would just generally get off the hype train, because everybody now has realized that like Jaden Daniels was undervalued, and now he has now been valued higher than where he should be going relative to the risk that he has. So I'm going to be moving off of him, which also is going to have that knock-on effect that I get less interested in Scary Terry, because I can't stack that as easily when it goes along with it. And that actually means that, like, from the standpoint of like how I would view things with the Justin Herbert injury, with Ladd McConkey, this puts Rome on the table. And I'm probably buying like 5 spike weeks with Rome. I'm probably buying like 5 40-degree days. And I'm probably buying like 5 weeks that he's going to lose me. Well, what am I buying when it comes to your Rome? I'm buying the theoretical upside that I could get a league winner. That's true. I'm also buying a replacement level guy that's going to either be like my wide receiver 3 or my flex guy at the prices that he's going at. And it's okay. So if I take Ladd off my board, I still have Rome there now, and I am more likely to be able to stack him when it comes to Caleb Williams. And again, this is just me, how I do my rankings. It's all based off the price, that risk reward that I have, when it comes to these guys. So again, like if everybody's pushing a guy up, I'm going to have the opposite reaction, because generally I don't want the same outcome as everybody else in my league. I want to win my league. I don't want to come in like 2nd through 10th place or 12th, 18th man vampire league. So anyway, moving on to the next group of guys we talk about. So Chase Brown, the news coming out of camp, he's primarily running as the RB1. And then news came out today that Zach Moss is listed as the running back 1 on the depth chart. Again, in general, what do we know? What are we trying to find out? Well, in general, with the $4 million that they're paying Zach Moss, they're not paying him like RB1 money. Doesn't mean they can't be RB1. So to hear that they're giving Chase Brown the opportunity, well, now it just becomes an issue of price shopping. He's gone up a little bit. He's still in that range, like 106 overall. that I would probably be feeling pretty good about pulling the trigger on like that upside. And he's like 112 on Fantasy Pros. So I would feel pretty good pulling the trigger on the upside of a guy that like may not be anything more than a guy I throw away week one based off of usage, but he's going at the price where it doesn't make a difference to me. I'm hearing enough news to make me go like, yeah, it's still worth spending on. Now, if you're risk averse and you need to go the opposite direction, you got the news today that Zach Moss is the guy to go after. He's going to be capped in a way that Chase Brown isn't, but I'm hearing what I want to hear about Chase Brown because, again, I want to be wrong on this pick as much as I want to be right because I can throw a 10th or 11th round pick away very easily and be able to pivot to the guy that I want to go after. Now, other news. So the flagship show of this channel is After Waivers. That's the proactive after waivers show that I do like on Tuesday nights. So anyway, we've been following Andre Iosivas from last year. He looks like he's the number 3. Now, there's a couple things when I hear this is going on. So the dreams of a Jermaine Burton breakout season are probably lower, especially like if the measurables on Iosivas are the right things. Now, the other thing when it comes to this offense, projecting 2025 is going to be really fun when it comes to the Bengals. But in this case, like, a lot of mouths to feed when it comes to Bengals. I do want pieces of this offense. That's part of the reason why I'm buying Chase Brown. It's probably the reason why I would be taking Jamar Chase off my board in this snake draft league at the 105 because of the fact that like there's going to be a lot of mouths to feed. If they like Iosivas enough to put him in that role and there's a vacated opportunity when it comes to Tyler Boyd leaving, you'll probably would want to spend on the free guy late in the draft on Iosivas to get like a wide receiver 3. That would be the expectation. I'm not expecting anything magical out of him. It's just that now the Bengals can turn more into a target distribution than they can do a funnel to Jamar Chase. That bothers me more than anything else. So this kind of has this little bit of a knock-on effect. If they really didn't have an idea who this number 3 was going to be, maybe I would feel better that Jamar Chase is going to get that target share up to like 30%. May end up being closer to 20%, which means less of a league winner. Again, this is not a real football channel. This is a fantasy football channel speculating on guys' value, their ability to win leagues at the price that they're going at. So again, Jamar Chase, good at football. Am I buying a 1,200-yard guy that has like 8 touchdowns that I can replace other places in the draft versus what a guy like Jamar Chase would have to get up to? And you're looking at, what he hasn't done since he was a rookie, like 1,400 yards, 13 touchdowns. Like, yeah, you may end up still getting this 1,200 yard, 7 touchdown season that he did last year in the 16 games that he played because they can go to T, they can go to Iosivas, they can go to Burton, they can go to Chase Brown, they can go to Gesicki. Like they don't have to make him a target funnel. So that's what I hear when I hear they like Iosivas because we knew that they liked Iosivas last year based off of his snap share going up as the season went on. So the stuff that we already knew, and it's just confirming that. All right, moving on to the Bills. So I still like Dalton Kincaid. I still think he's got the cleanest road when it comes to being the unicorn in fantasy. But some of the camp news, and this actually came out today when I was getting ready to do this, is Dalton Kincaid is shining in camp. Well, the news that was coming out before this is that the Bills are going to be like a wide receiver by committee. Dalton Kincaid is basically a wide receiver. So like some of these other guys come up. I still don't like Keon Coleman, especially as a rookie. In general, we're going to be like price shopping these guys, and that's all that really matters is just generally going after like the price shopping. And I don't even see him right now. There he is at 97 overall on ESPN. So when it comes to price shopping, I'm expecting that equal and opposite reaction when it comes to Dalton Kincaid, and he's still going at 67 overall on Fantasy Pros. So he may have dropped slightly on ESPN to 77, and I want that equal and opposite reaction. So may not be able to go out and get a Dalton Kincaid in this Yahoo league because I did get sniped on Dalton Kincaid in the 6th round of my draft, expecting to go up and get him. So I'm a little bit more bearish on going after your Dalton Kincaids at this point with this news that came out. Maybe I won't have to go up and get him and he can tumble around and then I can take him at cost. Probably less inclined to want to go up and spend that capital on that guy. So like 77 overall. This is why I bring up Jaylen Warren. I'd be looking at Jaylen Warren versus going up on your Dalton Kincaid. So now at this point, like I would have to choose between these two guys. Jaylen Warren may be a safer play than your Dalton Kincaid, even though you're buying all that upside. So if I do want pieces of this Bills offense with this news that's coming out that like he may not be the tight end one, he may not be on the field like that 70, 80, 90% of the time that we would need. teams tend to come out and tell you stuff. I listen to an unhealthy amount of fantasy football like Bootleg, PFF, and Underdog. The stuff that they talk about that with the insiders that they know, like we would hear news that the Bills are building their entire offense around their passing game around Dalton Kincaid. If I don't hear that type of stuff that's coming out there, that they're trying on other guys to either be like that wide receiver by committee or to, like who's going to end up being the target funnel, and it's not the guy that I would expect it to be. Like I can start moving away from those guys, especially if we're not getting the equal and opposite reaction. If everybody else gets scared, then I can take advantage of that. Is everybody else is like, no, I think he's going to be the unicorn. I'm going to pay those prices. Well, then they can take pay those prices. I can go someplace else with that pick because now there's too much risk involved with going after him. Because the news is not coming out with this. So like your Keon Coleman, I don't particularly like it. He becomes in the conversation again. Khalil Shakur, he's going to come back in the conversation, or he's going to move up in the conversation. You can see the equal and opposite reaction on this ESPN. And again, there's a reason why I like using ESPN because it is pretty casual friendly when it comes to this. Like Khalil Shakur, he's within draftability. You're probably buying a wide receiver 3. This would even move your Curtis Samuel up the board to end up being the number 1 on this offense. So even if Curtis Samuel isn't like a fantasy number 1, what am I buying? Well, I'm probably buying like a cap wide receiver 2. Well, where's he going out in drafts? I can look at the cost relative to the league that I'm in. And the other thing I bring up with Dalton Kincaid, why this bothers me enough that I would be looking to go a different direction. There's a couple other tight ends that the equal and opposite reaction. It's really easy with tight end. We're looking at like higher volume passing offense, number 1 or number 2 in their offense. Well, Jake Ferguson meets that criteria. He may be capped, but I can wait 2-3 rounds to go get your Jake Fergusons, and that makes it really easy. The other guy that I would talk about with this, instead of going out and spending that higher capital on Dalton Kincaid, especially if I would have to go up and guarantee him, is what's going on with the Browns. Because listening to the guys out there, I think this was the Bootleg guys talking about that the Browns are projecting to be a higher neutral pace passing team like we saw with Joe Flacco last year. That's why I said when I was breaking down the team by team breakdown, they went out and saying Jameis Winston. And I'm like, Jameis Winston is not a game manager. He's a gunslinger. It's odd that they would go out there and go like, we're going to be this really conservative offense to go along with that defense. Well, no, that's not how they looked at the end of the year when they got a little scary. They were throwing it all over the yard. They have a lot of money involved with Deshaun Watson's. It's not surprising to hear that they're like, hey, maybe we should design an offense around the strengths of the guy that we paid all this money to. That's what it sounds like what's going on with Cleveland. Now, I don't particularly like the AJ-Pex or over the AJ-Pex Amari Cooper. Not saying that's bad. It's just I can go different directions. In this case, the other news that's coming out is, the scuttlebutt, however you want to put it, is, oh yeah, the Browns are deciding that they're going to build their offense around like David Njoku. So maybe I'm not getting the number 1, but now I know I'm getting the number 2 attached to that like higher volume passing offense. So Deshaun Watson doesn't necessarily have to be good. He just needs to make David Njoku be able to return at the cost that he's going at. And on Fantasy Pros, where I go and I can actually find like Jake Ferguson, who's going to be attached to that Cowboys offense, projected as the number 2. Well, now I can go out and find David Njoku who's actually going lower than Jake Ferguson. Yeah. I still like Dalton Kincaid. I still like Dalton Kincaid a lot. I don't know how many shares of Dalton Kincaid I'm going to get. At that high school league, I went up and I got Mark Andrews in the 5th to be theoretically the number 1 attached to the Ravens. David Njoku, 97 overall. Yeah. I do like that pick, and he may end up being better if I'm planning to go double elite tight end, and I am. So David Njoku at cost, like, yeah, this kind of changes my mind when it comes to my strategy a little bit, going after like the guy, stuff that I wanted to hear in camp, that David Njoku was going to be the number 1 and number 2 in the offense, and it wasn't going to be like Jerry Jeudy. Well, that's what I'm hearing. Now it changes my mind when it comes to David Njoku. He did finish as the tight end 1, basically the league winning tight end 1 when it comes to the playoffs last year. All right, moving on to the Buccaneers. So the news coming out of Tampa Bay is that Jalen McMillan, the 3rd round draft pick, he's going to be the number 3 there. Something that we already thought that we knew. It's just being confirmed. Don't know if Jalen McMillan is necessarily draftable at this point. This may be very reactive when it comes to your redraft leagues like me. But you have Mike Evans over the AJ-Pex, and you have a questionable amount of gas left in the Chris Godwin tank. So again, if there's a guy that would be interesting week 1 to be able to give me a certain amount of spike weeks, even in redraft, would be Jalen McMillan. I don't know if I necessarily have to go out and buy him now, but Probably something I would be looking at when it comes to like Mike Evans, how he plays, and Chris Godwin, how he plays, and what the snap share on Jalen McMillan is. Maybe even be something that down the line as the season goes on, I have to be monitoring. I don't know how much this necessarily changed my minds from a redraft standpoint. It just means that like, yeah, there's another wide receiver, a rookie wide receiver, this story that we can tell, something that we already knew was going to happen. And theoretically, we can talk about like him finishing the season as the number one attached to this offense. This is stuff that we already knew. It's just being confirmed there. All right. Stuff with the Cardinals. So equal and opposite reaction. Listen to guys talk about this. Last year with the Cardinals, they were a run-heavy team. That's probably what they're going to project to be this year. So when I look at the cost of Marvin Harrison, this move on ESPN, and this was more based off my auction league than it was going to be off of like most of your snake draft leagues, because with Yahoo, you already were looking at Marvin Harrison going at the tippity top of his range of outcomes at 16 overall. And this is why I talk about like Travis Etienne going in the second versus whether or not Marvin Harrison's there. Probably looking at closer to like Nico Collins in that like 1,200 yards, like 8 touchdown role. He's still going to have a lot of competition when it comes to opportunities, with Trey McBride theoretically being a unicorn. Like Trey McBride can have like 7 or 8 targets a game, and that's going to make him a very solid tight end one. If you get 7 or 8 targets out of Marvin Harrison and you're spending like 15 to 16 ADP on him, like you got to bust. And that's what changed my mind on this one, where it's like, yeah, how do I get to the point where I'm getting like elite range of outcomes? Marvin Harrison, I just don't think it's in the cards. That's why I would talk about like your Malik Neighbors or your Roma Dunse's going a different direction with that overall value, where he's going out of draft. This is a hype train that's got out of control based off of what's the likely range of outcomes. Like he's going to have all that competition for opportunity in an offense that does project to run the football a lot. Probably going to be closer to a 7 or 8 target a game guy. And again, like 7 targets is going to give you about 120. 8's going to give you about 136. You need to get into like that 9 range to get in that elite level. And that's going to be with like Trey McBride probably commanding that same amount of targets per game in an offense that's probably going to be looking to run through James Conner on the ground. Because the other thing to be looking at that I was generally expecting to happen. Oh yeah, Amari DiMercato, another one of the after waivers guys. Yeah, he's basically the number 2. And again, from a real life football standpoint, if they can trust you because you do what you're supposed to do, you pass block and you run the football where it's supposed to go, you're going to be that guy. This is generally why I would be like, I don't know if Trey Benson's even draftable, let alone how fantasy relevant he's going to be. Doesn't mean that he's not going to get a certain amount of design touches a game. It just means that like if he's going to run as the number 3 and DiMercato would be the guy that they would turn this into a running back by committee if James Conner goes down, I don't know how much it's even worth keeping Trey Benson on my radar, even if I get that like James Conner injury. Now, with all this, like this does kind of change my mind on James Conner when I go back and I look at my draft strategy. Is some of these ugly RB2s become a little bit more interesting to me. And I think I had him. Well, I thought I had him right there. 64 overall on ESPN. And then he's relatively probably going in the same range. This kind of changed my mind when I heard this argument, like 65 overall James Conner. You're going to get some ugly receiving work when it comes to James Conner. So we can say that he's going to meet a certain amount of those criteria when it comes to just how he's used. Not quite enough. Like you're still buying an RB2. You're just getting him outside of like that RB2 type of range. He was good last year. So like now I can kind of change my mind and go like, well, I don't necessarily maybe have to go so running back heavy against some of those guys. I can, again, and this is why I was bringing up my Nico Collins shares, like changing my mind and going like, like maybe I'll just play it a little bit more safe. I'll punt. I'll go after some of these wide receivers because these RB2s that are later on in the draft, and the Cardinals are going to project to be a better offense. That again, they're not going to necessarily be a great offense. They're just going to be projected to be a good enough offense that like there may be a little bit more safety in these RB2s as the market shifts again, because again, when we were looking at the market earlier in the year, these guys weren't where they were on the board. And now they're shifting again because of the hype trains. And now I want to be able to take advantage of that. So these RB2s are starting to get a lot more interesting to me. And then the wide receivers are going to shift again and they're going to be pushed up into this range because I don't know how many of them after the Justin Herbert injury news that I can trust later on in my draft. Because I felt very confident about Ladd McConkey. Now I don't. So we already talked about this when it comes to the Chargers, this Justin Herbert injury, expecting that he's going to be in a boot for about a week longer. And then they're going to ramp him back up. If you have the ability to wait on this news and everything sounds fine and Justin Herbert's like 100% and all that stuff, like this would change everything. But right now, like my strats, especially if you have to draft early, this may even take like Ladd McConkey off the board as that theoretical upside. Again, when we talk about like the amount of targets per game that you're looking at, I would expect it's going to be relatively easy for Ladd McConkey to get about 7. Where he's going at about like pick 100, you're getting a wide receiver 3. To be able to really return on investment, you're looking at him having to get up to 9. If it's Easton Stick, I don't see how that's going to happen. If it's Justin Herbert, maybe. That's why I would like him so much. So this would probably be pushing me towards a later round flyer on a Josh Palmer if I really want to go after this in this offense, because unless I see that equal and opposite reaction to the rankings of Ladd McConkey, I'm probably going to be staying away from him because all that theoretical upside just is going to be eaten into because of the injury. Now, the other news with all this is Gus Edwards, who didn't really start camp, healthy. Well, he's starting to get a little bit of run. But the other thing is, like, I would expect that J.K. Dobbins wasn't going to be the guy. And right now it looks like he is. And then you combine that with like Vidal being injured. All this is saying like probably should be another offense that I want to be reactive about instead of being proactive about when it comes to my draft strategy. I am more, or I like the Chargers more than I've heard a lot of other pundits talk about, because again, if you're Jim Harbaugh and you're a good coach, I don't know how you say like Justin Herbert's bad, I'm not going to use him. And then Ladd McConkey's good at football. It makes it really easy for me. The injury goes like, now I can't predict this. If you're wondering about how I get to that, other things that are going out there. So listening to like the bootleg guys talk about this, the Colts are expecting Anthony Richardson to throw the football. So in order for him to be able to return on investment, it's all that rushing upside. If they're just going to turn into like a higher neutral passing rate offense, they're going to put the ball in Anthony Richardson's hands, which means that like you're going to get more scrambles and you're going to get the ability for him to win leagues because of that ceiling. His value doesn't come from his rushing work. The rushing work is the floor. His ceiling ends up being the passing game. If he turns into like a 4,000-yard passer with 30 passing touchdowns, you have a league winner. So stuff like this, and this is why in my snake draft league, I was able to go get him in the 4th round. So again, that's a 12-man league. I can maybe expect that I would be able to go up and spending a 4th round draft pick on Anthony Richardson isn't as much of a reach for me in that league as even in a 10-man league. But in this case with Anthony Richardson, I am getting a little bit more bullish when it comes to him and that theoretical upside to go compete with some of these other guys at the prices. Now, in my auction league, it's going to be a little bit easier for me to get him, or I just won't get him at all. I will price track him up to a certain point, and then if someone goes over that point, I still have the chances to go out and get like a Caleb Williams that we talked about today that are still out there with that upside. All right, moving on to the Eagles. So this Will Shipley news. What am I looking for? Like, what do I think is going to happen? What's actually going to happen? Well, the Eagles have used running back by committee before, so it doesn't really matter what I think of Barkley. Can we tell the story where he's going to get design passing work and he's going to get red zone opportunity attached to a good offense? Yes. Well, what's going on with the Eagles? Will Shipley, the 4th round draft pick, well, he's basically, getting first team run, which means like it is probably going to be a running back by committee to a degree, which is just going to cut into the theoretical upside of Barkley. Now, this means like in this Yahoo league where I maybe was expecting Barkley to theoretically fall to me in the 2nd, and I would pull the trigger on him there again, primarily more because it's a piece of a good offense than anything else. I'm less likely to do that because, I'm buying a guy who's going to be relatively capped when it comes to a ceiling. And we'll talk about a few more of those guys later when it comes all down to this. All right. The Giants, slowly but surely buying that the Giants may not be the worst team in football this year when it comes to the offense in this case. So a couple other things to look at. So stuff that I was expecting to happen, Tyrone Tracy Jr., I think he's a 5th round draft pick. He looks like he's going to be the number 2 in the offense. So expecting that he will slowly but surely eat into that role as the season goes on. Now, where he's going in drafts, and this is why I have this right now on the ESPN, 223. He is going to be like a first week lottery ticket that I'm going to find out what happens and I can move on. Are they that bad? Well, my expectation of Daniel Jones has always been like he's not entirely horrible at football. He may not be good, but I don't necessarily need Daniel Jones to be good. I just need him to not be bad. Now I can go out and I can get a receiving back attached to this offense where now I can maybe get the number 2. So what makes Devin Singletary less interesting, again, the 2 things I want are, red zone opportunity. Might not get that with the Giants, but I can get design passing work when it comes to Tyrone Tracy. Now that I hear he's the news is coming out that he's the guy. Now I can start planning, like, am I going to be reactive on him week 1, or am I going to be proactive on him to end my draft off? Now, the other thing involved with all this is if I'm buying into the Giants a little bit more, because, camp hype is camp hype, and we can get on board with this. Malik Neighbors gets a little bit more interesting because I think that Marvin Harrison's being bought at his ceiling. And I think Malik Neighbors is being bought at his like mean or median, whatever word you want to use, the middle of his range of outcomes, which means I get a little bit more interested in on a guy. So if I can get like that 1,200 yard, 8 touchdown season from Malik Neighbors, and I can get that 1,200 yard, 8 touchdown season from Marvin Harrison, but I'm going to spend like 30 picks less to find out. Like, yeah, Malik Neighbors gets a little bit more interesting when it comes all of that, as long as I'm feeling I'm not buying the worst offense in football. And, a lot of these teams, because it's camp, a lot of these teams I'm going to feel like are not the worst offense in football. Some of the reason why we can be right on that is because there's going to be injuries that we couldn't predict ahead of time. And, the teams that end up being that bad may be the ones with the injuries, as opposed to the Giants. And all the Giants have to basically do is be this year's Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you're getting, this year's Mike Evans at the draft capital that you're putting in with Malik Neighbors. So I am getting a little bit more bullish on him. All right, Packers. So last year after waivers, we were tracking Dontavian Wicks since right about here, where I'm like, well, who's this guy? The 6th round draft pick from Virginia, 66% snaps. Well, I said reason why I'm not too interested on the Packers is because Romeo Doubs is probably going to ruin all of our fun when it comes to like Luke Musgrave or Dontavian Wicks, or, if you're into the thing with like Jaden Reed. So in this case, when it comes to the Packers, Romeo Doubs is having the best camp at everybody. That's what the camp news is. So the problem becomes like, if you ain't drafting Romeo Doubs, you probably shouldn't be drafting anybody when it comes to this offense. So he's going to be on the field probably about like 80% of the time. And if you want a piece of this offense, may not be the cheapest guy, but he's closest to. So this is like Kyler Murray, where it's like, well, the best range of outcomes versus value is going to be Romeo Doubs. So this is another guy from a standpoint, like when I talk about that mock draft I did in my high school league, Romeo Doubs probably has about the same. He probably has the same production. He's going to have likely the same production as your Scary Terrys or your Chris Godwins, but I'm going to be paying like 151 to find out when it comes down to that. So like good offense, getting the number 1 attached to the good offense where he's going at. Yeah, it's going to be relatively easy. If I'm wrong with this pick, I can move on. If I'm right, like what do I get? Like wide receiver 3 that I'm going to get a certain amount of spike weeks from, or theoretically I could even push up into a certain amount of consistency when it comes to him. But the camp news coming out is like he's the guy, and Dontavian Wicks is not getting, he's not taking over the offense. He's not the guy that's like, not coming off the field. No, it's still Romeo Doubs, and this is kind of what we thought was going to happen. Now I can just take advantage of it when it comes to cost. And that means I can go after some of these dart throw wide receivers later. And I can prioritize the running back 2s in the middle of the draft versus some of those other upside wide receivers. Okay. Other stuff. Jonathan Brooks. Yeah. Expected to miss, up to week 3 or week 4 of the draft stuff, or the regular season stuff we already kind of expected was going to happen. So that means like I probably do have a volume based shake and bake RB2 for, 3, 4, 6 weeks of the season when it comes to Chuba. And you see that his price is going to reflect that now. He moves all the way up to 117 on ESPN. So like, yeah, everybody is aware that you're going to have a shake and bake a certain amount of weeks when it comes to Chuba. Probably not going to lose you any weeks, probably going to win you a couple of weeks, and you're going to have like your 40-degree days when it comes to that, when it comes to him, when it comes down to this. Does it change my mind on Jonathan Brooks? Well, that gets a little bit more interesting because in that one mock draft that I did, someone went up 40 picks and took Jonathan Brooks in the 7th round of the draft. That's how I wound up with my Chris Godwin shares. And I was like, wow, like, and I wasn't even necessarily expecting to go all the way up and take Jonathan Brooks in the 7th round of the draft, but like he was already gone at that point. So even if I wanted to, there just wasn't anybody left when it came down to that. And that's going to be a business decision for you to make. Again, know what you're drafting. If you have the ability to wait like up to 6 weeks to find out with Jonathan Brooks before you can put him in your lineup. I did last year go up in my high school league and take Brees in the 6th round of the draft, or excuse me, the 4th round of the draft. Now, the difference between Jonathan Brooks and Brees is at the time you were buying a offense when it came to the Jets that was projecting to be somewhere between like not bad and good. When you're buying the Panthers this year, you're expecting that it's going to go at least into that not bad range, and it's going to be expecting a lot. This is one of the worst offenses last year. Now, again, I do think that Bryce Young is not bad at football. I do think they've done enough stuff. It just becomes amount of risk. And are you going to be the guy that's going to go up those multiple rounds to go up and get him? Now, other stuff that happened, Xavier Leggett gets injured. I don't know if they even have the latest news that came up. He gets injured yesterday. Who's going into MRI last time I heard. I don't know how much time he's going to miss. The equal and opposite direction is going to mean that may end up being a little bit more of a target funnel when it comes to Deontay Johnson. I would like that relative to the cost if I need that guy. So Deontay Johnson may be a little bit more interesting to me than like a Scary Terry or Chris Godwin, something along those lines, if he's not competing with Xavier Leggett. Because of the draft capital that the Panthers put in, you could see, well, I shouldn't say you, I could see a situation with what I was trying to listen to in camp where they try and force Xavier Leggett to be the focal point of the offense. And they were telling us that Deontay Johnson was going to be the focal point of the offense. Well, now we know it's probably going to be the case. So that's going to move him up slightly when it comes down to that. A piece of a bad offense, I'm expecting to be slightly better. Probably capped when it comes to being able to win me leagues. All right, Patriots. Conflicting reports that both Jalen Polk and Javon Baker are balling out. Don't know how many leagues you're going to have the ability to go out there and get both Polk and Baker when it comes to that. And Polk's already moving up. Now, like I said, with Pop Douglas, I'm not interested in a guy I think is capped out as a wide receiver 3. If you want to go out and get that guy, go out and get those guys. Javon Baker's probably got the ability to win leagues in a way that like Jalen Polk has probably got the ability to be Bobby Trees. Also going to move up Ramondre Stevenson. Don't know how much receiving work I'm going to get out of Ramondre Stevenson this year. I think the offense has a substantial chance of being at least not bad enough that I can get something out of this, and then it just becomes an issue of price shopping. So like 1,400-yard Ramondre season, flirting with like 10 touchdowns. The more I like the idea of Jacoby Brissett running this offense with 2 wide receivers that they like, the more the offense is going to be at least serviceable enough from a fantasy perspective to get me home when it comes down to that. So like probably more interested in him in my auction league where I might be able to get a slight discount than having to knife fight with him in the range. And right now, like Jaylen Warren would probably be more interesting to me. And again, like I talked about with Jonathan Brooks, like which one of these offenses I'm going to expect to be better is going to be the one that I expect, or that I would be more willing to put more of the capital in, because that's going to mean they're going to have more red zone opportunities when it comes down to it overall. All right. Other things with the Raiders, expecting to find out that like Dylan Labe was going to be, eating into Zamir White's role. So I still don't dislike Zamir White. I just don't know what leagues I would ever get him in at the cost that he's going on. It looks like it may be a little bit more of a cap situation when it comes to the Raiders. And, one of those things like, am I going to be reactive when it comes to the Raiders? Am I going to be proactive? I'm probably going to be reactive. But like Dylan Labe, like this is another one where it's like, well, I might end up getting that like floor receiving work on a week-to-week basis, which allows him to move up into a particular amount of value on a week-to-week basis. And that means that like the actual guy to own when it comes to the Raiders down the line may end up being Dylan Labe, because if you're buying a guy who's capped because he's not going to get the receiving work because it's going to go to Dylan Labe, and then it just becomes an issue of what would happen to Dylan Labe if there's a Zamir White injury. So this probably does hurt my ability to go and get Zamir White unless I get that equal and opposite reaction where he falls probably like a round or 2 in my drafts to go out and get him. Finishing off with the Saints. So Kendre Miller is hurt again. This means that like over the age of Apex, Alvin Kamara, I ain't drafting him. I'm just going to say I ain't drafting him. It would be negligent to not talk about the fact that like bad offensive line and Alvin Kamara is going to end up being the opportunity funnel where he's likely going to be, as a running back, the de facto number 2 in the passing game behind Chris Olave. It's not pretty. It's just the way it works out. So the possibility that Kendre Miller was going to eat into Alvin Kamara, well, no, you're probably buying somewhere between a high-end volume-based RB2 or a low-end volume-based RB1 attached to not a good offense. I mean, it's there. I won't be touching it. It's there. And then this means that like Jamal Williams is probably back on the menu to a certain extent. I guess I could say like, I don't know how I was expecting to get a cut, and now I don't think I'm going to get a cut, which means it's just going to be ugly. And again, probably another offense that I should probably be a little bit more reactive to than proactive to. A couple other things, like I guess Roman Wilson was balling out for the Steelers. Even though Van Jefferson is expected to be the number 2 in that offense right now, he was doing really well. He gets injured. The other thing, and this is just me saying, like I told you so, Jordan Whittington, the 6th round draft pick for the Rams, like he was balling out. Don't think he's going to be fantasy relevant this year. But down the line, like, I guess he is doing well. So that would be something that I would be expecting. And I think as I take a look at my notes, that's about all I got for today. And if there's enough stuff out there or something big happens, I guess I'll be back in the future.